So this is going to be hard and maybe even a little bit embarrassing, but I was wrong. And not just wrong, like I got a couple of facts wrong, but wrong in a way that actually compromised one of my core values, which is humility. So in large part, thanks to viewer comments in a previous video, I'm actually starting to question a core belief that I've held for most of my 23 years in this field. And that core belief is this: most tech leaders and planners have a deeply flawed mental model of software development, and the actions they take and the processes they put in place are the root cause of most of the dysfunction that we experience in software development. You know, the PMP project managers and the evil scaled agile framework consultants and the non-technical managers, they just don't get it. All they care about are deadlines and processes and forecasts and predictability, and they just don't get complexity. And I bet they've never even written a line of code. So what gives them the right anyway to try to box us in? How dare they constrain us? Where us, we, I, being the sole holders of this one truth, we just need to do a better job of convincing them, right? So as much humility as I pretended to have, I was still in this mindset. I was still dividing the world between us and them. But I've recently had an aha moment, as I've mentioned, a sort of epiphany, not to overstate it, which I will discuss in this video. Essentially how I can be right and wrong at the same time. So in a previous video, I made this assertion that this one flawed analogy was basically ruining all of software development. And that analogy was that software development is like construction. But the gist of my argument is that construction is more of a simple process. It's more predictable. There's less change. And in software development, there's frequent change. There's high skill ceiling. There's requirements changing all the time. The technology's changing. And to try to use the processes that are used in construction and apply those to software development is foolish. So the first way I was wrong is by referring to construction as a super simple process when I don't even know construction to begin with. And that's one way that I sort of violated that value that I hold pretty highly, which is humility. So I kind of assumed that I knew enough about construction because I've had stuff built before that I understood the process. Well, it turns out there are people in the comments in that video corrected me quite a bit. So this was an awesome comment. There was a lot here. I just took a snippet here from no name, no last name 8501. Comment is: construction is a highly chaotic process no matter how much they like to pretend they can plan it. Frankly, change is practically unavoidable despite the underlying mechanics, materials, and the final product being well known and understood, which is not necessarily true either, LOL. So that kind of sounds a lot like software development. When I actually started thinking about my own experience with construction, that was sort of echoed. And I guess I kind of forgot that when I did my previous video. I had a house built. They started digging the basement, and it happened to be one of the rainiest Marches on record in this area, and they couldn't get the basement dry. We ended up having to pump out all this water and put all this extra drainage in, and they didn't realize that the water table in the area actually could rise up a lot further than they thought. We had to deal with that. That was an extra like $8,000 I had to put up. Another really good critical comment here from DWIS2556 is: the base comparison is already faulty. Houses are not just simple. Buildings have many variations. The grounds they are constructed on, their surroundings, weather, etc. The list is very long what actually goes into planning for a building, and many of those components are as unknown as parts in software development. And as I've just said, that's actually echoed in some of my own experience. And so there were multiple comments like this. So this actually sets up the second way I was wrong, which is I just put too much emphasis on the power of one single analogy, which ironically makes me guilty of the very surface level thinking that I think analogies result in the first place. And this was pretty directly called out by Internet of Bugs, which is a pretty big channel, one that I follow and respect Carl quite a bit. And I really appreciate him commenting here. His comment here is: it's not a great analogy, but it's not a horrible one, especially when talking to someone who isn't technical. Like all analogies, it falls apart if you try to take it too far. But the idea that it or any analogy is, quote, ruining software is disingenuously hyperbolic. So this is actually the comment that really got me thinking, maybe I've missed the mark here. Am I thinking about this correctly? Because yeah, I guess it was sort of hyperbolic. It was an exaggeration. And I had to really think, do I really think that strongly about this whole construction mental model? And is it as big a deal as I'm making it out to be? And then the comment that it was disingenuous. And that one actually hurt a little bit because basically saying that it was clickbait, like my video was clickbait. And so I really needed to think about that. Do I actually believe what I'm saying here? And it caused me to really be introspective about it. So there's two more ways I want to discuss here how I was wrong. But the third way is really important. And that is there's this other truth about businesses that I have been resisting for years. I have not wanted to accept it as a truth. And that is that businesses need predictability to be profitable, to operate effectively. And for most of my career, I have been sort of preaching that software development is by its nature not predictable. And I do still believe that for the large part, we don't always know exactly what's going to happen. It's very complex. We can't see the future precisely. We can crystal ball gaze all we want, but there's always going to be things that happen unexpectedly. And so I've taken that to an extreme, even maybe without admitting it to myself all the way, that any effort to try to make software more predictable was completely wasteful. And so basically rejecting this idea that a business could predictably invest in their software development capability, in their software products. So putting up large chunks of money and wanting to know if they're going to get a return on that investment in some way. And it really shouldn't surprise us much. I mean, think about it in your own life. Like if you're having a basement remodeled and a contractor came to you and said, yeah, just give me 10 grand. That'll fund us for a couple of weeks. We'll do some exploration. We'll show you some designs. We might, put some half walls up so you could see what you want. And then, every 2 weeks, you're going to give us another $10,000 until we're done. More hyperbole, probably, but that's how we think as humans. And it's no different in business, at least as far as I can understand. But again, trying to bring back some humility. I've never run a business. I've never been responsible for managing a multi-million-dollar budget, having to answer to an executive team for how we're spending the money. Are we progressing in the investment? Is it worth it or not? That's an immutable truth, I think, of business that we in the software development industry would just need to accept versus trying to fight against. Now, I'm not saying waterfall is going to make its triumphant return, and I still believe there are better ways of developing software than being heavily plan-driven, but fighting against the need for predictability in the first place is just a losing battle. Which brings me to the fourth way I was wrong, and the main thing I wanted to talk about in the video is this mindset of us versus them, which is the exact opposite thing I want to do with the channel. I don't want to create antagonism or further the antagonism between team members and engineers and QA analysts and product managers with the business and project planners and managers. And what I really think we need to do as an industry is try to bridge that, try to develop shared language, reach across the aisle, so to speak, and better understand what constraints the business are actually under so that we can help enhance predictability while at the same time keeping the bar for quality high, designing modular systems, enhancing changeability, being efficient with the company's investment in this capability, where it doesn't have to be one or the other. We can enhance predictability while doing what we do as professionals. So maybe it's a Pollyanna pipe dream. Let me know in the comments what you think. But I do think there's things that we do as team members, as engineers, that can enhance predictability. So one thing is simplicity. Simplicity in the design, in the code base, reduces surprises when you go in to make a change. So simplicity basically enhances changeability. And when we have a high level of changeability and we can be a little bit more precise in our effort estimate to make that change because we have a high confidence that we're not going to run into anything unexpected. Like there's not a minefield that we have to sweep first. Sort of related to this is having a modular decoupled architecture. If you make a change to one piece in the architecture, you have a higher confidence that you haven't broken something else in the system. So again, it enhances changeability and change confidence. Another thing we can do is we can be more aggressive and intentional and consistent with paying down tech debt. And in so doing, we reduce those surprises or like, oh, I can't touch entitlements because it was written 15 years ago and it's spaghetti code. So you got to plan for a full month effort, which could have been maybe a few day effort if you had actually invested some time in to do the refactoring. And another way to reduce sort of the surprise factor when you go in to make a change is having a high level of domain expertise. And this isn't something that just happens overnight. If we invest in things like pairing and mobbing, where the domain knowledge of the team is raising up together, then we can just be more effective in that system making changes. I'm not saying that we'll be able to be able to pseudocode everything out in advance. We'll still have some discovery, but there actually will be less discovery when you're in a system that you're very familiar with, and not just the system, but if you're familiar with the domain itself. Another thing we can do that I'm super guilty of is just don't be a plumber. We don't need to write frameworks and these neat patterns and abstractions for everything. It kind of ties back in with simplicity, using off-the-shelf packages and things where possible so that more of our time is being spent towards delivering the value that we need to for our product that we're working on. And then, this one's probably pretty obvious, but there's this whole continuous integration, continuous delivery thing, which really enhances predictability because we can automate the testing and the deployment of our systems. It happens the same way every single time. So there's not a lot of variability in how we test and deploy. It enhances changeability, it enhances change confidence. So investing in having that full automated pipeline is another way to do that. So if you're like me, I can hear people saying, but yeah, we're not ever given time to do that. And I am one who complains about this as well. So what I think we can do a better job of is helping connect the dots between those things and other things that I maybe didn't mention. You can add some more to the comments, but connecting the dots between that, what we want to do, and how it actually helps the business, how it can reduce our cost longer term, how it can help us be more predictable. Otherwise, what we've probably been experiencing is like the one tool in the toolbox to increase predictability in software development is more upfront planning. And that's what I think we can and need to do a better job of, is not reverting back into essentially waterfall, where we are doing so much of the planning and we have to have all the acceptance criteria completely spelled out and all the UX mocks completely pixel perfect and all the design and the flows and the data models before we put hands to the keyboard. I still think that there are better ways of doing that, and I've talked about it in other videos. And if you sort of geek out about this kind of stuff and you either are in a position of some sort of like company authority or you want to try to move into a leadership position, I did a video on some of the ways that I think tech leaders fail. And so that video can help you sort of avoid some of those pitfalls. So I really appreciate the support and the comments that I've been getting. Please leave more comments. I will try to respond to each one, and I may even feature one in a future video. So just really appreciate you. Thanks a lot.